cannot be completed.
Please enter your authorization code.
Hello?
Hi, is this Debra?
Yes?
Hi, my name is Chris Wagner, and I'm a detective with the Carver County Sheriff's Office in Chaska, Minnesota. And I'm calling... I'm sorry. I don't know if this is a good time or not, but I'm calling because we're doing the investigation into Prince Rogers Nelson's death. And I understand that you were the business manager years ago, and I was wondering if you had any information that would maybe assist in our investigation on anything maybe that you had seen pertaining to anything suspicious or concerning back when you worked for him.
I was his business manager. I'm so old now to remember the years. I want to say 2013, 14, and 15 until Phaedra Ellis took over his finances.
Okay.
So I guess that would have, maybe 2014. It was when they had done some touring, and she had done some touring for him, and she informed me that going forward she was going to take over his finances. So that was kind of the end of my time.
Okay.
So I don't know, specifically what I might be able to help you with. I didn't see anything in his personal life that I would see troubling or concerning, but I would suppose when the new group of people came in, I certainly had less access to him, and I would, certainly say that from a business perspective, perhaps things changed, and there was some concern on my part that I would have discussed with him that I was not able to discuss with him for sure. But I didn't see anything, you know what I mean, like anybody around him engaging in any behavior related to any drug use or anything like that. I never saw anything that I would think would be concerning. But again, I think on the business side there were things that definitely were concerning enough to me that I did my own individual research on, just because I was concerned.
And by that you mean things like having the cash paid concerts, or not keeping, like that kind of business issues, or not? That was when or hiding, I should say, money. I know that they had talked about a charity show that he was supposed to do, where all the proceeds were supposed to go to charity, and then he kind of balked at that and didn't want to surrender everything over to charity. Like those kinds of business things, are you thinking?
Well, in more those things, and yes, all of those things. So I actually withdrew from the representation because I told Phaedra I was concerned about him doing cash shows, particularly because of his, issues with the IRS. I just wanted you to give me a little information, so I knew I was really talking to you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
if you want to call me back, that you certainly can call if you want to verify. I understand that. I totally get it. If you want to call our dispatch and have you transferred to my phone, that's totally fine too. If that would make you.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. I had actually heard that you were doing the investigation, and someone gave me your name, and so I just
was it Kieran Sharma, perhaps?
Yeah, but
okay.
I had heard about it. I heard from Kieran and from others because they knew I was concerned.
Okay.
So I was concerned. He had been having kind of hip problems, and he had become more and more withdrawn. And we did a show in Chicago that was set up by Van and Phaedra. And it was supposed to be a charitable concert, but we couldn't kind of reconcile the settlement and where the money was going. And all of these people just came out of nowhere, Van and Phaedra and Diana, and they were, really wanting to raise money for these charities, but I would ask all the questions like, what's the money going to be used for? What's 501c3 status? And it just was always a little vague for me. And his own charity was disqualified. So I started doing some research into his own charity, and I saw that it had lost its 501c3 status. So I knew he wasn't doing it through his own charity, and I was kind of surprised that they didn't ask him. It just seemed like the logical question business people would ask. And so I had a very direct conversation with Van, and I said, hey, you're on CNN, you have all this going on. His charity isn't operable. You must know that. It's lost its 501c3 status. Is this something you really want to risk your career on? Because I got to tell you, if it were me and I was on CNN, probably not,
Yeah.
And he said, he just gave me this look like, you're insignificant, nobody cares about you, or are you going to bless this and give us this money? And, I was kind of seen maybe a little bit as the obstructionist in this. And so
what were they were trying to have these concerts but make them cash only so that they couldn't claim how much proceeds. So kind of like a tax evasion thing?
Correct.
I'm not.
Okay. Correct. And it was odd to me that Van, I told him explicitly, which is just, really a breach of client confidentiality, but it's a public record that Prince didn't have a charitable organization. He just didn't have one. So anything that they would do to advertise that would just be wrong. And if Van had these charitable organizations in the past, certainly he would be familiar with the idea of an organization being tax exempt and having 501c3 status. So they could never really get it off the ground. So they didn't end up doing these big shows that they said they were going to do. Instead, they did these smaller shows at Paisley Park that were cash only.
Like and Paisley when they Park did their After Dark kind of stuff?
Exactly. And after they had done their second or third show and I was uncomfortable with it, I told them I would quit if they did any more cash shows. And then they did a series of cash shows at the Palladium in Los Angeles. And at that point, I instructed our tour manager that he couldn't do any more of, these shows on behalf of Prince. I said to Phaedra and, the attorney Rhonda Trotter, he is taking cash for these shows. No one knows where it's going. I don't even know if it's going into Brimmer Bank. I don't have signing authority on his account. I have no transparency into this. I'm going to quit. They came to me about 3 or 4 weeks later, and said that Prince was going to fire me. I never had a conversation with him after that. But the other thing that concerned me, even more than that, was that they got him out of his publishing deals and his record deal, which totally it's just crazy to do. And I explained to Prince, I explained to Rhonda, and I explained to Van, and I explained to Phaedra explicitly. And by the way, I had no idea how Van knew anything about music and where he even came from. So I explained it to all of them that, collecting record royalties and particularly collecting publishing royalties from all over the world, you needed to have a publishing agreement, and that it was malpractice to let him get out of his deal with Universal without having a replacement deal in place. So they decided that collectively that they were going to collect these royalties through a publishing company that Prince owned. I saved it at the time, I may not have now, but then out of the clear blue sky, I get these registrations. You have corporate registrations. Mm-hmm. I get these corporate registrations for new Prince entities for his publishing and his record royalties. And for some reason, they used my address, but the owner of all of these entities was Phaedra. And it really surprised me because, with my clients, I'm a member. You have I'm a manager. If you have an LLC, you have the actual owner, who's the member, and then you have the manager, who's the person who manages all the affairs. So there's a separation between ownership and management. So on my clients' LLCs, I'm always the manager. 90% of the time, or if it's a corporation, I'm the chief executive officer. But I'm never the shareholder or the member. So when these entities were formed with Phaedra as the member, I became really, really concerned. And I picked up the phone and I called Rhonda and I said, how could you take him out of his publishing deal at Universal and self-publish him and have Phaedra own these entities? Because basically, if you re-register the copyrights to these publishing entities, which you have to do to collect the money, she's the owner of all of his copyrights. And I was basically told to stay out of it. So at that point, I thought, that's really odd. So I did my own independent research on other entities that she owned. I don't know why. It just struck me as I was curious about all of this. And then I saw that she also was the owner of all of these entities for Van Jones. And so I knew, and so at that point I picked up the phone and called Kieran, which is why Kieran said, probably told you to call me. And I said, Kieran, I'm really worried what's going on. I think they're taking his publishing catalog.
What is the publishing catalog?
That would be, so when a song is written, when you hear a song on a radio,
yep,
there's two parts of a composition. There's the actual recording. That's the person who's made the record singing it.
Okay.
And then there's the actual composition, which is the music and the words.
Okay.
That anybody could sing. Every time a record is played on the radio, the royalty is not paid to the person who's singing it. It's paid to the person who wrote it. And in Prince's case, he's one of the few people who writes all of his own words and all of his own music. So he has one of the biggest publishing catalogs in music.
Wait, I'm trying to write this down, Debra. Hold on here. So the royalties are given to the composer, basically, not the singer. And
correct.
Prince has one of the largest publishing catalogs
in history, like in music. So, for example, when Madonna sings Like a Prayer, yep, if you hear Like a Prayer on the radio, if you hear Manic Monday on the radio by the Bangles, if you hear anything, if you hear Nothing Compares to You, it's not the Bangles or it's not Madonna who's getting the royalty from that. They get a record royalty when the record is sold, but when it's republished on the radio, the person who's getting paid is the person who wrote it. So it doesn't matter if when Adam Levine sings Kiss, mm-hmm, Prince would get a publishing royalty just like if Prince sang Kiss. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter who sings it. What's paid out on is the publishing. So, for example, when Prince redid his publishing deal time before I did it, his advance was about $30 million.
Oh.
So this is not a small amount of money. It is the main source of his revenue.
Okay.
So he has a significant music catalog. And so now think about it. If the song Like a Prayer is played anywhere in the world on the radio or anywhere in the world in a restaurant, Prince is getting a royalty. Well, how would you collect it all? You can't. So you have a publisher, in his case, Universal Music Publishing, who administers his publishing by having, Universal Music all over the world, right? Branches that enter into deals with restaurant, blanket, Muzak, elevator music, sheet music, restaurants, performances. They want to play Kiss at the Super Bowl or at a soccer stadium in Argentina. They've got to pay a royalty for that. They want to use it in a commercial. They got to pay a royalty for it. And that all of that is extraordinarily valuable. So that's what a publisher does. So they got rid of his deal at Universal. Now think of it, you as an individual who knows nothing about music has got to go and collect that money.
So he wasn't receiving any royalties then. Once they got him, I mean, they took him away from Universal, then he was no longer receiving any royalties.
Well, I'm sure they probably went out and tried to collect them, but if where the money was going was in an entity that was owned and managed by Phaedra, not